Thanks very much. Yeah, hello guys. Goeiedag to the Dutchies in the room. Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen and get this started. So you should all be seeing a slideshow. It's not shared, it's this button instead. Yeah, so I work for the Institute of Strategic Dialogue. It's London-based. I'm based in Ireland at the moment. And today I'm going to be talking to you about conspiracies, disinformation, misinformation, extremism, hate, harassment online, and how these things all intersect. So quick kind of running order about this. What extremism looks like today, with a special focus on far-right communities in Ireland and beyond, with some examples and some definitions. We'll be talking about the lure of lies and conspiracies and the orchestration of hate. And here I'll talk through some research that myself and some of my colleagues have carried out, especially around kind of narratives employed and the kind of online tactics and tools used amongst kind of online extremist communities. And then we'll be talking specifically about online spaces and platforms, the kinds of places where these conversations, where this kind of activity is taking place. And then just before the end, just the impact of COVID-19, how this kind of colors everything and how things have changed or been adapted or morphed in the last 18 months, 2 years. And the last slide, just asking kind of where to next. So zooming out, how do we see extremism play out today and explicit far-right activity? Far-right activity represents a very active extremism in Ireland and beyond. Ethno-nationalism is a constant. It's best encapsulated in Ireland by this Ireland for the Irish phrasing that defines Ireland as a monocultural nation for white Irish people only. This belief is then demonstrated in reactions or sentiments towards housing rights, healthcare, and of course, immigration, and more recently towards COVID-19 and reactions towards this. This is replicated across all European nations, all nations in different ways, all serving to articulate some form of us, the natives, versus them, the foreigner or the invader. Broadly, such communities support nationalism and nativism. They engage in racism against minorities in the state. They support xenophobia and even authoritarianism in some corners. And all of this is seen in support and commenting upon the activities of far-right political figures or groups, or also on international developments too, as they may reflect on the country and can be framed in a positive sense. This also means sharing support for similar parties and figures abroad, and generally expressing their wish for something similar to happen in Ireland or in the country of note. Narratives and myths are essential to far-right extremist ideology and community formation, and are the tools used by such communities to express their beliefs and try to frame events or developments in a way that supports these beliefs. The narratives we see circulate within these communities are those similar to other nations, that is, narratives of victimhood, of a loss of culture, of white culture, or the local kind of native culture, or a community under attack. These are the building blocks upon which extremism and hatred is formed. These narratives address emotional needs more than ideological ones. Perceived hardships that members of the in-group face can be framed as a consequence of the actions or perceived actions of the out-group, be that the state or actions by minorities. The narrative also offers solutions to these problems, that is, join us, support us, become one of us. Reverse discrimination being demonstrated in the belief that migrants are being housed before Irish people, for example. And to varying degrees, far-right factions, groups are hostile to liberal democracy and are broadly anti-system. They reject diversity in all its forms. This is common too, and this can manifest in the encouragement of violence. And at all turns, we see extremist communities lean on conspiracies to support their position and make arguments that frame their stance positively. So why and how do conspiracies spread? Why are they used? On the left, you'll see the conspiracy chart. This was designed by a misinformation researcher, Abby Richards, breaking down some of the most popular or common conspiracy theories online today. At the heart of conspiracies are also people or groups who have a vested interest in people believing them or making people believe them, and essentially using and operationalizing these conspiracies. And this is where we see extremists and extremist behavior kind of intersect with conspiracy theories, especially online. Conspiratorial belief is linked to certain psychological needs that are not being fulfilled. For example, the need for knowledge and certainty, and a desire to know why certain events take place. Uncertainty increases in times of crisis, such as a pandemic, which means that more people will be drawn to conspiratorial narratives. If people aren't satisfied with the agreed upon reasons for certain events, conspiracy theories can seem more appealing. They're often simple narratives that allow people to easily recognize who is on the side of quote unquote good and on the side of evil, stripping out the complexity of a situation. The brain loves this. They also give people information that gives them a sense of control during crisis situations. And this idea of access to secret knowledge is also found to motivate people, and distrust in institutions is also inherently linked to conspiratorial belief. So earlier this year, we researched Irish far-right communities online, another colleague of mine, Aoife, and myself, and specifically the use of these communities of the online platform called Telegram. So what we looked at 4 case studies and looked at the activities of Irish far-right communities in reaction to a number of events. The first event was the shooting of Georgian Kensho. He was a Black Irish man who was shot over the Christmas period in Dublin. And we looked at the reaction amongst these communities on Telegram to the incident. What was clear from the outset was that these communities wanted to use this incident to, first of all, push racist, anti-Black disinformation, racist disinformation online about Kensho and the wider Black Irish community. One of the earliest messages that was posted about the situation was make memes and get trolling, i.e. make posters, make images, and start sharing them online to try and upset or anger people, to share false information about Kensho. The poster you can see on the right, this is Georgian Kensho. The poster claims that Kensho had 32 criminal convictions for violent offences. This is false. This is not true. This is clarified and confirmed by the Gardaí, the Irish police, and then shared by Irish media. But this originated online and was really popularized by Irish far-right communities online. And these kinds of communities used this incident to target Black Irish communities and framing protesters as BLM terrorists, as Black Lives Matter terrorists. Another incident we looked at as part of this research was Roderick O'Gorman, who is the Minister for Children here in Ireland. He's a gay man, and he was appointed last June, I think it was late June, early July. And what you really saw amongst these communities was an instant reaction, an instant rejection of O'Gorman as the Minister for Children, and the immediate linking of his sexual orientation to his role as the Minister for Children. There was an effort to link O'Gorman to comments that he made about Peter Tatchell, who has written about paedophilia in The Guardian in recent years, and essentially trying to link O'Gorman to Tatchell by framing him as supportive of Tatchell's views, i.e. supportive of paedophilia, and linking the two here together. What you really saw with this campaign was that O'Gorman and the reaction to O'Gorman's appointment, it became a megaphone for slurs, a smear campaign that acted as an entry point for wider discrimination directed against LGBTQ plus communities and groups. There was the targeting of people or groups who attend Pride events in Dublin and Ireland, and also LGBTQ politicians, senators and things like this. And also a manifestation of a protest movement to quote unquote protect the children, i.e. the children were vulnerable to such figures. And then there was this really moved, you could see how this moved from online to offline, sorry, in a quick time, in the space of a few days. And then we had Irish far-right groups marching in Dublin, and they had very explicit banners about protecting and saving their children, and then there was nooses on the banners as well. So this moved offline in a very, very quick time, and then it was used as the kind of as a wider campaign against LGBTQ people. And then harassment from these communities is common. Whoever their perceived enemy is, often it's the media, it's researchers, it may be left-wing groups or anti-racist, anti-fascist groups, and also politicians from that side of the aisle as well. And when you view these communities, you can see in real time these campaigns being orchestrated on Telegram. And Telegram does not have the same scale or reach as Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or even TikTok, these larger platforms. But what it does have is a very hands-off content moderation approach, which means that a lot of the most explicit stuff that targets or discriminates against people or groups that would result in a ban or a content takedown on the larger groups, it stays up on Telegram. So what you can see is Telegram really acts as a staging platform for these explicit communities, and Telegram offers large-scale public channels, but it also offers kind of group chat functions. And you can see in real time how these kinds of campaigns are orchestrated in real time to essentially move to the other platforms where they will try and get more eyeballs, get more attention and notoriety from members of the public. And then another way we talk about orchestrated hate is used online. We must also take into account gaming, and particularly as it relates to young people. Earlier this year, some colleagues and I engaged in a scoping project exploring the use of gaming-related platforms, Steam, Discord, Twitch, and DLive by extreme right, far right communities. The gaming world is expansive and allows huge numbers of people across the world to play and interact with one another, and with it, the cross-pollination of content, cultures, ideas, and potential radicalization. Gaming communities have played an important role in the formation of contemporary extreme right culture. Gamergate is a social phenomenon that saw mass mobilization and harassment by gamers against female journalists, against female software and game developers, in a pushback at the perceived intrusion into the gaming center, into their world, into their community. And this has been seen by many as a pivotal moment in the formation of the so-called alternative right, alt-right in the US and beyond, and the larger kind of 4chan culture, this transgressive, aggressive culture online. What we aim to do with this research was explore the specific ways in which gaming is used by extremists, either as a tool through which to target new audiences or as a method of building or strengthening new communities. Importantly, this series of research found limited evidence to suggest that online gaming is used as part of a deliberate strategy to groom new people into extremist movements. But instead, what we found was that gaming is predominantly used by extremists as a means of bonding with their peers over a shared hobby. So that idea of community formation. The most obvious role filled by gaming in the extreme right channels analyzed appears to be the strengthening of existing extremist communities. That is to say, extremists use games in the same way as any of the millions of other gamers do across the world, as a means of having fun, socializing, and strengthening their community. On one platform, Steam, we found evidence to suggest that gaming has also been used as a means of living out ideological fantasies and providing spaces for extremist role-playing. For example, historical strategy games set in World War II during the Crusades were particularly popular, with extremist players promoting anti-Muslim or neo-Nazism in their commentary around the games. There also exist games where users can play as Nazi Germany and therein play out fantasies of white or Aryan supremacy. Across Discord and Steam, we observed users engaging in or calling on others to join in raiding. This is gamified harassment of their perceived opponents. In this activity, which it's a long-standing activity, a tactic of internet trolls and the extreme right, online harassment of minority groups it's treated as a form of a real-life game. And this acts as a potential vector to bring young people into contact with extreme right-wing activity and communities online. And lastly, it's important to point out that there's also a robust counter-speech movement on online platforms too. On Twitch, for example, we found an active community of creators that regularly produce content that criticizes extreme right topics or figures. And such users are very online and are very aware of extremist voices, and so can almost act as an early warning system or a monitor system for such kind of egregious behavior. And then another form of organized hate I'd like to cover is just the idea of accessibility, or how low the barrier can be for being hateful online. Earlier this year, I released some research examining the state of extremism and hate speech on TikTok. TikTok has a reputation as a space for cooking videos and dance trends, and it is those things, but it also has over 1 billion users across the world, which means that it has a lot more than that as well. No platform and indeed no demographic are exempt from extremist activity and opinions and behavior, especially on the larger platforms. We aim to address the knowledge gap on how unique aspects of TikTok are used at scale to direct hatred at others. And we found that the videos and activity expressing support for extremism in the form of white supremacy, anti-Semitism, and other forms of hatred is easily discoverable on TikTok, and is often allowed to remain on the platform, making it a safe space to hate. Coded or veiled keywords are a popular tactic of extremists on TikTok and online. Anti-Semitic hatred, for example, was at its most explicit in Holocaust denial on the platform, and this was often done by way of using coded or veiled keywords, especially items of food, along with more overt references such as ovens, for example. And the use of such terms often escape efforts by platforms to catch offensive and extremist chatter, along with emojis. With emojis, we have symbols and signals that can be used to say a lot with very little effort. And there's a collective understanding amongst extremist communities and these kinds of in-groups of what an emoji may be used to refer to. And by way of a rope emoji or a knife emoji, a lot can be said, and these can be used to issue threats or support acts of violence. And hate is now extremely accessible, and the barriers to entry are so low online. And platforms can also make it so easy to spread hatred. And this specific point relates to TikTok in terms of how, and Instagram and other platforms, and how they offer users a suite of editing tools and filters to produce what are sometimes very creative and technically impressive pieces of content with users requiring few technical skills to do so. The image you see in the top left there it's what's called the green screen effect on TikTok. So I can appear in front of an image. It's kind of like the filter we all use for Zoom backgrounds. The person here has elected to use the inside of a stable or a concentration camp, I think is their intention. And they're playing out a dialogue about a person's family going missing, a Jewish person's family going missing during World War II. So you can see the intent, the anti-Semitic nature of the content, and these are filters and tools that are baked into to TikTok, such as the green screen. And then just to talk a little bit about platforms, it's very important to try and understand the role, the type of extremism and the flow of extremism online is to try and understand networks and how networks differ. This iceberg, it's very helpful for visualizing these things. At the top, we have the open networks. These are the large scale social media platforms, the ones that do have scale: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'd add TikTok to that now as well. These are the platforms that that offer a scale where things really do take off, be it claims, misleading claims, conspiracies. They really do not kind of hit the mainstream until they hit this level. But a little bit below are what we call closed networks. So we have Telegram, WhatsApp, Snapchat. These are enclosed platforms that can't be searched for. So this is where you often see some of the most explicit extremist chatter. And this is kind of the staging platform that I mentioned before things hit the mainstream, hit the open platforms. And it's very hard to monitor from a research, from a journalistic point as well. It's very hard to monitor extremist activity on these platforms because they are closed by nature and they are private by nature. So it's very hard, and it serves as a red flag of sorts. I mean, of course, TikTok or of course WhatsApp and these kind of apps are used by all of us for very normal circumstances, but it can serve as a red flag if someone is engaging or has kind of shown signs of extremist activity and has shown an interest in apps like Telegram that are shown to have more presence of extremist chatter than others. And at the bottom, fringe networks, Reddit is there. I personally wouldn't put it there myself, but we also have Gab, we have Discord, and we have 4chan. This is where some of the most explicit content is shared. These platforms don't have terms of service. They have very few rules. So you can essentially say what you want. And it's not so much a freedom of speech space as a freedom to hate kind of space. And then just before wrapping up, talking about extremism and COVID-19. COVID-19 has been a boost to extremists, the far right in particular in Ireland and beyond, and it's provided new opportunities to organize, to mobilize, and for potential for recruitment. At the heart of the far right response to COVID-19 have been attempts to target and erode trust in democratic institutions, government parties, state bodies, and use the frustrations of the public to embed themselves further in communities. Throughout COVID, far-right groups have been at the forefront of protests who framed government responses to decisions as against the general public. We've also seen far-right groups attempt to place themselves at the heart of communities through initiatives like food drops, helping the homeless, these kinds of things. Lockdown policies were seized upon by far-right entities who were among the earliest groups to either organize or participate in anti-mask and anti-lockdown protests. And these communities have relied on conspiracy theories and mis and disinformation at all times to criticize or discredit government or state responses to the pandemic. In 2020, this was demonstrated mostly in claims centered around the origins of COVID-19, racist claims about minority communities spreading it throughout Ireland or throughout different countries, and invoking claims about 5G as well. And then really since 2021, these have developed into claims about vaccines, pushing theories that the vaccines are killing thousands or millions of people, false claims about ingredients within the vaccine, and also responding to COVID developments with threats of violence, for example, around the possible introduction of vaccine passports. And what we're witnessing really in many countries is the intersection of conspiracies, disinformation, harassment, and extremism, all of which have created an increasingly hybridized threat landscape. COVID-19 has served as a catalyst for conspiracies, disinformation, and the wider extremist nexus, and has allowed extremists to march and protest on the street, to critique the government, and to grow their influence and ultimately expand their reach. And lastly, where to next, just throwing it out, some topics and issues that we're paying more and more attention to are climate and environmental issues, the idea of climate denialism, of course, but also conspiracies related to climate and extremism related to climate, to questions of identity, gender, and sexual orientation. What we really mean here is the kind of hostility extended towards transgender people. And then migration and race, we see this is one of the kind of core traits of far-right communities in extending racism towards immigrants to the country, post COVID-19 life, if there'll ever be such a thing. And lastly, just what else? And I'd like to hear from other people as well. But at that stage, I'll hand it back and happy to answer any questions at this stage.